So now I'm thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker, Obianuju Ekeocha, known to her friends filling the room right now as Uju. She's an internationally acclaimed pro-life speaker and strategist, founder and president of Culture of Life Africa. It's an initiative dedicated to the promotion and defense of the African values of sanctity of life, beauty of marriage, blessings of motherhood, and the dignity of family life. Culture of Life Africa answers the assaults on these values with African women's voices. She's advised many African government and religious leaders on pro-life and pro-family issues. Uju's been welcomed as a speaker at pro-life events in more than 40 cities now, I think, right? 15 countries, I think that's grown since this number, around the world, and on numerous broadcast networks, including the BBC, and television and radio, EWTN, and radio, television and radio, Ave Maria, and of course, Relevant Radio. Consistent with her love for the wonder of life, Uju is also a specialist biomedical scientist in hematology in the United Kingdom. Prior to that, she was a medical laboratory scientist at the University of Nigeria teaching hospitals. She was born in Southeast Nigeria. She's the youngest of 6 children and has resided in the UK since 2006, although she seems to be traveling around the world most of the time, doing work that's just absolutely amazing. Uju, please come up.
Wow, it's really beautiful, a beautiful view I have from here. Just probably a couple of weeks ago, it's a bit more than a few weeks ago, maybe about a month and a half ago, I had insisted on speaking with Sue Barrett because I said, before I come here and speak, I usually just like to speak to the organizers to know a bit about the event, especially as I haven't been for this great event before. I just want to know what it's been like in the past. And then she told me, well, she made the mistake of telling me who the last speaker was. Because I said to her, so who spoke last year? She said it was Governor Huckabee. To be honest, on that day, I thought to myself, gosh, you guys know how to just go this way. And I started feeling a little bad for the day, and I just kept reflecting, how could I be like the follow-up act to Governor Huckabee? There's nothing I'll say here today that will ever live up to what, the great man that a lot of us have been fans of. So I thought to myself, well, I'll just come here today and tell you, yes, it is true you had Governor Huckabee last year, and I'm sure the speech was great, but I'm also sure he wasn't wearing a nice Nigerian gele like this one, okay? So he didn't tie a gele. He didn't tie a Nigerian gele here, so at least there's something, okay? I have something for you. All right. It's a real pleasure and honor to be amongst you. Yesterday I arrived here from Vienna. I live in the UK. I'm Nigerian, as Sheila said. Over the weekend, I had the great privilege of speaking at the March for Life in Slovakia. And I arrived yesterday, and I didn't actually realize it, but the board members of Aid for Women had prepared a dinner. So Molly had hosted a number of us at her home, and it was just such a pleasant evening I spent with Molly and Anne and Michelle and Chris. So just amazing men and women. I was in awe to be among them. But it was while I was discussing with them that I realized that they were asking me, how did you get into the pro-life movement? Because I wasn't supposed to say that here, because I didn't plan to start off with an introduction like that. But I think I'll just give kind of a quick rundown as to why. Yes, you had Governor Huckabee last year, and then there's this Nigerian girl coming to address you. Who is she? So I had absolutely no intentions of being in the pro-life movement. Born and bred in Nigeria, always pro-life because obviously Nigeria is a pro-life country, so our default position is a pro-life one, thank God. Moved to the UK in 2006, went to pursue my master's, my career, and I was very much happy, living a very nice life, I'll tell you, single and unconcerned about anything, minding my business. But one evening, I was watching the television, and for some reason, I switched on CNN. Please don't judge me. I was only 32 years old at the time. I'm much older now. So I switched on CNN and I said, let me just see what's going on. And there was Melinda Gates, the wife of Bill Gates. She was having this interview, and she was telling the host who she was talking to about this program she was having, the Family Planning Summit, which was being held in London. And the interview lasted about 15 minutes. And the more I listened to her, because when I honestly started listening to her, I thought, okay, great. The Gates are well known in among Africans because they build schools, they build hospitals, and all kinds of things. So I said, okay, let me just see what she's talking about. And she said, okay, we are doing a family planning summit. We are trying to raise $5 billion with a B to provide contraception to the women in the 69 poorest countries of the world. And I did the math and I thought, oh my goodness, Nigeria is one of those countries. So I started listening even closer. So she said, we need to do this and we have to get African leaders on board. We have to get Western leaders on board. She had a really lofty plan and very ambitious one. And she said how the African women really, really wanted a contraception. The people she had talked to in this slum in Kenya said that this was what they wanted. And I was asking myself, I have aunties and I have cousins in Nigeria and I have my own sisters. So do I know anybody who says, like, all I want is just contraception? I have had to send money back home for all kinds of things. My mom would say, oh, we need to pay school fees for your cousin and we need to pay hospital bills. But no one has ever said to me, send us some nice contraception as you have it in the UK. No one. So what I saw was a Western woman, very wealthy, very powerful, very much influential. And I thought on that very night that I was watching that program, I said, this woman is lying about my people. She's lying. So I did something which was very much out of character for me. And I advise you not to do this at home. But while I was watching this program, I was so upset. It was like there was some kind of righteous indignation that I couldn't have explained where it came from, that I took my remote control, yes, I'm ashamed, and I threw it at the television screen. So yeah, I was that angry. And then I sat up that night, couldn't go to bed, couldn't fall asleep because everything she was talking about just went through my mind, and I had to do something. So something says to me, write the reasons why she's wrong. And I thought, okay, I'll do it. So I sat up and I thought, I'll just write it on my phone. And I started typing out the words and, this is going to cause this is going to do from an African perspective, sociologically, anthropological issues, scientific issues, because I work as a scientist. There were all these things that I saw just why it was such a problematic thing to get African governments involved in the business of population control, where there are no human rights in some of these countries. So all these things I was just pouring out that night. I started writing this letter, this thing that I didn't know it was a letter, but I started writing it at 11 p.m. at night, and I put the final full stop at 5 a.m. in the morning. And then I sent it out I didn't know where to send it to. If I had known Sheila at the time, I could have sent it to you, dear Sheila. But I had listened to Teresa Tomio on EWTN, and I said, okay, I'll just get her email from the internet and I'll send it. And I did. And I didn't expect it was going to yield any fruit, or she was going to see it even, or even reply for that matter. But Without getting into too many details, within a few days, she got this email, she read it on her show, somebody heard it, printed it in a Catholic newspaper, and then 2 weeks later, the Vatican had it published on their website. So it just went viral. So that's what I'm here. That is what brought me here, because when I told you I heard a voice that said, why don't you write it down? It so happened that that would have been God saying something, because ever since then, my life has not been the same. God put me in trouble, because since then, I have now gone to Slovakia, was my 24th country in the last 6 years. So he has had me traveling 70 cities. All right, so the bio is like out of date by like 2 years, and I'm that lazy to whatever. But I have now been to 24 countries in 6 years, and I have spoken at my 10th March for Life. I have marched for life in 15 different countries, just marching and speaking about this issue. Okay, this is why I was so upset when Melinda Gates did what she did. And it's not only about contraception, it is actually really about the sanctity of human life. I come from a country where human life is seen as precious from the womb. I come from a culture that recognizes bloodlines. It's so precious to the African people. It doesn't matter how educated or not educated we are. When you go to someone's house, the first thing, when I was little, I go to someone's house, the first thing they ask is, whose child are you? It's not really about knowing my dad, it's really they're trying to trace exactly where you have come from, the genealogy. We don't have to go to ancestry.com, mind you. Because there are all these old women in my village in Nigeria who actually are the ancestry.com. So they look at you and they say, is that Christopher's child? Yes. So they do that. The Africans treat the genealogy as such an important thing and such a precious thing. It's a connection between the past and the future. But mind you, if that is the case, that also means that we are not only serious about our ancestors, we are also very, very serious about the children in the womb who carry the very blood of our ancestors. We are the people for life. But when I say we, do not feel excluded by what I say, because you have also come from a similar culture up until 1973. We have had the culture of life, that community and societies have known that there is something really distorted and something really horrible and horrific when a doctor who should be healing then ends up killing. So this is where we have all come from, but unfortunately for Western countries, the lie has been perpetrated, and through legislations, through court orders and all kinds of judicial maneuvers, abortion has been brought in, and they've made abortion as part of your lives. But that was not always the case. So in Africa, there are 55 countries, and out of the 55 countries, 4 of them have what you would call abortion on demand. So more than 80% of the African countries actually do not have abortion on demand. In those countries, yes, abortion is very restricted. In some countries, it's completely illegal. So there are all these things to protect the unborn. Even some of the African constitutions recognize that the child in the womb, is alive and is part of the citizen. So when you read it, like the Kenyan constitution declares that human life begins at conception, is right there in that constitution. It is. The Ugandan constitution mentions the unborn, which is actually quite unique, and does go ahead to say that one is not allowed to abort the unborn. So this is where the Africans are, but the struggles continue. So this was why when I came to the United Kingdom back in 2006, even before I came, I thought I knew everything there was to be known about Western life, Western culture. I came from a very educated family, and we were proud of our heritage. And I, had spent a lot of time watching, yes, don't judge me again, watching the media. I was watching a lot of cable news while I was in Nigeria. I even watched Oprah show every day. So I thought I knew what life was like. Yes, I watched a lot of movies. So I really honestly thought that I knew everything there was to be known about Western life, about Western culture. Then I came to the UK. The one thing that I didn't ever find out was that it is legal to kill an unborn child. I didn't know that. With all my education, I had gone to university in Nigeria where I was working as a scientist before I left and I came to do my master's in London. But this was really well hidden. Didn't even show up in any of the books I had read, didn't show up in any of the movies. They have a way of hiding it. So I came to the UK. Once I ended up working in the hospital, I worked for the NHS, which is really the main employer for most medical practitioners and healthcare professionals. Then I found out that in our delivery suites where babies are being born, yes, babies are also being aborted. And that was a huge shock to me. And that was a big slap on my face. So for those who are wondering, in the UK there are about 200,000 abortions every year, because we saw from the excellent video from Aid for Women. Here in the United States, I think it did say about 1.3 million abortions a year. In the UK, it's about 200,000. But one might say, wow, you're so lucky. In the UK, there are less abortions. Actually, no. 1 out of every 4 pregnancies as well ends in abortion. So really, it is exactly what you have here. But the difference is that 98% of the abortions in the United Kingdom are paid for by the British government. So it is even that one step further. But here in the US, let's talk about the United States. We are at a point of shame. Before I came to the West, I always saw the West as the place where everything was perfect, particularly human rights. This is the land of human rights. In Nigeria, in fact, at a point when I was growing up, between a certain age and a certain age, I was living under a dictatorship. So we had the military junta during the time of President Abacha. He was a dictator, and a lot of Africans have lived under dictatorship, and we know that human rights is not to be easily had. But we always looked to America and the United Kingdom and Germany and France as the land of justice. But this is the place where 1.3 million unborn, preborn babies are not allowed to be born. While at the same time, there is so much improvement and advancement, medical advancement, and that we're finding ways of doing all kinds of amazing things in the healthcare domain. I work in the healthcare domain in the UK. I work as a scientist, so we see all these incredible things, and every day they teach us a new technique. We're doing the fetal tests, so we are able to tell even the blood group of a baby in the womb before the baby is born. And yet, at the same time, they are finding also easier ways to abort babies. The second video we saw here was about the woman who tried to get a reversal, and thank God she had a reversal, but the abortion was actually originally meant to be a mifepristone and misoprostol abortion, so abortion pill. And that's happening more and more. It's happening in the UK, it's happening in the US. So many more abortions, so many more hidden abortions, much more difficult to catch, much more difficult for people to be able to intervene with the women. So that is happening, and it is injustice on the level of anything that has happened in the past that we could call a crime against humanity. So as a black person, I cannot tell you how many times that I have thought about slavery, one great injustice of the past. I am fortunate to be African from Africa, and when I was growing up, I was the youngest of 6 children, a normal, very normal African family. Youngest of 6. My father, an academician, so he was teaching, he was a professor at a university, will always tell my siblings, my elder siblings, not to allow me to watch anything that wasn't animation, so myself and my brother. So he wouldn't let us watch films when we were very young, but the only things he allowed us to watch were films about slavery or the Holocaust. So it was later that I realized that these also were censored films. So I didn't know. I thought, I could, at 3, I had watched movies about slavery. I had watched things that would show real man's inhumanity to man. And so we were exposed to these stories for a long time. And we were able to reflect on it. We were able to think about it, to know about it growing up. So as an adult, I have gone back in my mind and I've wondered, why did my father allow me at the age of 3, at the age of 4, at the age of 6 to be exposed to such sometimes really gruesome stories? And I think I know why. It's for me as a child growing up never to take for granted what true justice and true human rights is. But I never was exposed or I never saw any stories about abortion. Hence, the reason why I didn't actually know that we had another thing that is, the horrific human rights abuse of our time. So I was, once I found out about it and got involved in the pro-life movement the way I did, I went headlong into it. So it's not just about being a critic of the Gates Foundation, though that is sometimes satisfying, I must tell you. So it is sometimes satisfying. But I have really gone in to know exactly what has been happening with the battle for abortion. And what I found out, dear friends, is actually a bit worse than what I thought or what I saw Melinda Gates doing. It is that, yes, African countries are mostly pro-life. Yes, we have pro-life constitutions in some countries, and we have excellent legal system, at least with regards to abortion, protection for the unborn. But then when you step back a little bit, you see that there is some battle going on. And what is this battle? It is that people are coming from the West, from here, from the United States, and coming into African countries, and they are trying to lobby against African governments, or they are trying to lobby African governments. In some cases, they are taking out court cases against African governments, being paid for, no, not by the Nigerian naira or the Ghanaian cedis, is being paid for by the dollars and the pounds and the euros. They fight against us, they fight our governments, they find fringe groups in Africa, women's groups, feminist groups, the African feminist groups. But these are really people in the margins, because most of the African countries are really predominantly pro-life, the people themselves, not just the laws, the people themselves. I'll tell you a little story. I come from a state called Imo State, which is in the southeastern part of Nigeria. And we do have a bit of the state system as you have it in the United States. So we have governors who can actually, yes, sign laws or sign bills into laws. And at some point a couple of years ago, there was some sort of anti-violence bill to protect women from abuse. But then someone came and told us there is an abortion clause in the 56-page bill. And we doubted him, but after a while, he was able to get us a copy. This was a photocopy of a photocopy, but we saw it right there. And in this bill was a provision for abortion. And who brought this in? It was NGOs, Western NGOs, who were lobbying until this kind of clause was put in and into the original draft. And then the bill was passed because it was an anti-violence bill, and who doesn't want to protect women? Then our governor signed it into law. But once it was exposed, the Archbishop of Owerri, my home diocese, started to call out the governor and said to the governor, you cannot bring abortion to this state, because obviously Nigeria does not allow abortion, but this governor felt that he could pass a bill that made a provision for abortion just so that he can get a place for the abortion workers to set up shop. And so the Archbishop starts to call out and say to the governor, you have to remove this clause. You have to remove the entire, I think it was like 2 sentences, but it obviously made provisions for abortion. And the governor was, he said, no, I'm not going to do anything. Everything is fine. Then the Archbishop called out to the lay people. And the African women, they tied their gele like this one. They came out to the governor's house, and people were crying and saying to him, you want to kill our children and our children's children. They protested 7 days. On the 7th day, dear friends, the most miraculous thing happened. This arrogant governor of ours, he came out and he made an apology for that statement within the bill, and then he completely removed it, made more apologies to the people. He made more apologies to the people and said he didn't even know it was there. Mind you, he had been called out, he had been warned, and he didn't realize how people were going to go against him. But everybody told him, you do this, you will never have a political career in this country. That's how it works in Nigeria. You don't ever come out and campaign on the basis of abortion, because you will lose even the primary of the primaries. You will not make it very far. That's how most of the African countries are. But when you then step out, then you see the Americans, unfortunately, not yourselves, but you see people who you may know, or people who are just ordinary American citizens, who come out and they set up shop in our capitals. Sometimes they are living in hotels because there's a lot of money. They are working for organizations like International Planned Parenthood Federation. They are working for other NGOs, DKT International, Marie Stopes International. They are living out in African capitals, and they are working very, very hard to get abortion into the African countries, into our laws. So I went to the United Nations this year. I go to the United Nations actually every year, because there is a very difficult conference that they do for women every March. It's called the CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women. It's very hard to go to. Very hard to go to, because initially I used to think that just like all my naivety and all the things I had thought about America before, and all the things I had thought about the West, and all the justice and human rights I told you about, I had this view of the United Nations like, the arbiter of morality. I thought this is the place to go to. In fact, we were all raised kind of thinking the best job one can have is working for the United Nations. So I started going to the UN. The first year I started doing pro-life work, because someone said to me, you need to go to the UN and see where it's all happening, where the Africans are surrounded by Western nations and there is just this struggle going on. So my first time at the United Nations, I think, was 2013. And I wept on the first day, because we went into this meeting and these women started talking about abortion and abortion rights, and these were UN women, so these were people that I would have expected so much more from. So we go to the UN, And then we sit in for these CSW events, and you see where the real evil happens. Beautiful women, beautifully dressed, everything in place, makeup in place. And then they open their mouth, and it's all about how abortion can be made a right. So this was shared this year. So I've gone every March, and March 2019 I was there. I sort of infiltrated a meeting. To be honest with you, sometimes the abortion meetings, they don't like us attending, pro-life people. But then I go in there, and there's not a lot of black girls, and then they treat me so well because they don't know. So I went in this year, and I picked up this really, really horrible document called the Brussels Declaration. I will have this at the end, so if you want to just, unfortunately I just have one copy because of course there was only one copy given to me, but it's also online. But the Brussels Declaration was launched at the United Nations headquarters, and when you read it, friends, it's about making abortion human rights, an international human right. It says abortion, a woman's fundamental right, and has about 10 or 11, 12 points, and it's about how abortion should be legal in every country in the world. So this was an agenda that was written out in Brussels and launched so proudly by a group of powerful Western nations, not just Belgium, but a group of nations, and they launched their Brussels Declaration. Now this morning, something almost opposite of this happened. And I don't cry easily, but I had prepared my speech for today. I woke up very early this morning because of jet lag. I'm still living in the UK time, so every 4 a.m. I wake up. So I'm awake, and I'm just trying to catch up on news and things, and I saw something that made me shed real tears in my room at 4 in the morning. And that is the fact that the United States has, of course, now, just more recently, has become a voice for life internationally, which is not something that I'm used to seeing. Starting from the Mexico City policy, yes, I've said all this, yes, there are all these Americans who are lobbying and all of that for, for abortion in different places. But whereas before, when I started this work, a lot of them had dealings with your government. But as of this year, as of last year, as of recent years, the American government has decided to promote life internationally. So why did I cry? Mind you, I have been so unhappy about the Brussels Declaration, and believe me, I've talked about it in different places. I've shown it to so many people. And it does make one feel a bit hopeless when you know powerful countries are for this abortion as a woman's fundamental right. So I read this, and I thought to myself, I must share it with the good American people that I will be speaking to this evening. This was a statement that was given 2 days ago at the United Nations by Alex Azar. Many of you may not know who Alex Azar is, but he is the Secretary of the Health and Human Services. So he stood up 2 days ago during the UNGA. The UNGA is the United Nations General Assembly, and he read this, part of the statement he read. So he said that he is pleased to represent the United States and 18 other countries, and I'll tell you some of those 18 countries, and that the United States and these countries do not support the references to ambiguous terms and expressions, such as sexual and reproductive health and rights in UN documents, because they can undermine the critical role of the family and promote practices like abortion in circumstances that do not enjoy international consensus and which can be misinterpreted by UN agencies. Such terms do not adequately take into account the key role of the family in health and education, nor the sovereign right of nations to implement health policies according to their national context. Now, this was the main statement that did it for me. He said, there is no international right to an abortion, and these terms should not be used to promote pro-abortion policies and measures. There is no right, there is no international right to abortion. None. I need you to understand how important this is. Because, mind you, the British government, the French government, the German government, the superpowers have been at the United Nations for the last decade or more, boldly promoting abortion. And when that happens, these are giants. Countries like mine, Nigeria, other African countries, even Latin American countries, are so afraid because who are you to go against Germany and France? And you know, when the Allied forces, so to say, when they come together, who are you to speak against them? But this year, 2 days ago, the United States stood up boldly and did something that I have never heard of. The only people who speak like this at the United Nations are the Holy See and the Pope when he goes to give a speech. But this year, the United Nations spoke exactly as any Pope would speak. They gave a statement that easily could have been made by Pope John Paul II. So I said I was going to mention some of the countries that the US said they were representing in making this statement. So this was a joint statement. The US was giving this statement on behalf of Haiti, Guatemala, Mali, Congo, Egypt, Nigeria, Sudan. You see, some other countries were there as well. But there was no Germany, there was no France, there was no United Kingdom. This time the US stood with the little people. The people who have recognized life, the people that I have been speaking about this evening, countries who are saying so desperately, our children in the womb are precious to us. We may not have money, but we don't want our children aborted. It is a sacrilege to have our children aborted. This year, the United States defended the little ones. I thank you for this. And I am very grateful for the work that the pro-life movement in the US has continued to do. Because yes, this was a statement given by the HHS, but the HHS probably wouldn't have the confidence to go out and make this kind of declaration in front of the world if it wasn't that they felt confident that there were people like yourselves who were very much in support with this kind of message going out on your behalf. So I thank you, and I am grateful for your work. I am grateful for your persistence and insistence on this very issue, this non-negotiable issue. Earlier this year, I spoke at the March for Life in London, and it was the second time of me speaking at the March for Life UK. But it was the first time of the march being held in London and myself speaking at it. Last year it was held in London as well for the first time, but I wasn't a speaker. This year I was a keynote speaker. And it was so important to me to have been there and very exciting because the march was actually held in front of the British Parliament. So in front of the House of Commons at the Parliament Square. And when I was speaking, I called people's attention again to the issue of slavery. And it was quite significant that we were standing right outside the House of Commons. yes, the same House of Commons where the Member of Parliament, William Wilberforce, from Yorkshire, sat more than 200 years ago, and he fought for people like myself. He fought for the recognition of the humanity of those who society had just said, well, they're not really fully human. And I said to everyone, well, look at the parliament that made it possible for me to be able to stand here today and address you in the heart of London. But then, even though I'm grateful for all of that, but there is still more to be done. Because there is another group of people that society is now saying they are not fully human, not quite, not unless the mother says so, not unless the baby is wanted, not unless the baby is expected, not unless it's a royal baby. You know, there are all these things. But this House of Commons is now one that is going against everything that it has stood for and everything it has worked for centuries. The slave trade came to an end in 1807, and in 2007, a special £2 coin was launched, and I brought that £2 coin with me on that day, and I showed everyone. I am so happy with that £2 coin. I never spend it, even if I'm broke. But it does have the shackles, the chains broken, and it's the commemorative coin for the end of slave trade. And it was about the work of people like Wilberforce. So today, we are looking for a real end to abortion. It's not just about having the laws. Yes, there are all these ways that we could talk about ending abortion, but we need something on that scale. We need abortion to be completely ended. We need to win minds, and we need to win hearts. With much love, but every bit as relevant as the work that Wilberforce did at the British House of Commons 220 years ago. Every bit as relevant. And it might not seem to you that what you're doing is on that scale, but it is. How do I know that? Because today I saw one part of that work. I went into one of the centers for aid for women, and they allowed me to be a volunteer today. I told them, don't let me get in the way. And Alina allowed me to just be like a little fly on the wall. And I'm sure some of you already know the kind of work that is done there. Many of you probably have been supporters of this great work. You've seen their videos, you've supported them over the years. But what I saw, for me, felt like I was watching something like what could have gone on that led to the end of slavery. I felt that I was seeing something happening at the front of the battle line. And the kind of dedication I saw, and the kind of love I saw with which the client advocates were talking to these ladies. And as God will have it, while we were there, one of the women walked in. She had her baby with her. And I learned that, of course, this baby was saved by some of the client advocates at the Aid for Women. This baby was already tagged for dead. I think sometimes we take it for granted. It's like, yes, a baby has been saved, but you know that baby is going to be someone's father someday. And this little child, who would not have been alive except for the work that was done in this little center. That work is not only important, that work is about saving human lives. Every bit as human as you and I. How important it is. So it's the work being done to save individual babies, but it's also a work being done to end an entire culture, the culture of abortion. It is happening in pregnancy centers like theirs. It's happening in maternity homes like the ones they set up. We couldn't go to a maternity home, but I've learned about the Monica's house. And they have two maternity centers, I believe, and the sort of work that goes on, that these amazing men and women who are working within Aid for Women are providing a real safe haven for women and their babies. And they are working selflessly. But think about this. Next door, I learned, and in fact I realized, then in number 8 of Michigan Avenue, 18, I think, is a Planned Parenthood. A Planned Parenthood where babies' lives are brought to an end. We know the sort of work that is being done there. And I kept asking myself while I sat at the Aid for Women office, I wonder how many staff they have in Planned Parenthood. Surely they have a lot of staff. Surely they might even have like bigger offices, or definitely they have many more centers. They are spread out more, they have much more funding, they have much more going into their work. And yet, Aid for Women is just right there next door. So I'll make an appeal. I'll make the appeal. I usually don't do the ask, but I will do it. Because it's not just about raising money for a pregnancy resource center. It's about bringing a culture of life to Chicago. I want to hear by the next time I'm in contact with people from Aid for Women that even another center has been opened. I want to hear that they have more staff. I heard that there were 7 new people that came in. But I want to hear about many more. Why not 70? 70 is not that much. We have many more babies to save. Yes, I know this African girl is coming here and telling you hire 70 more people. But I have the audacity to do it because I want to see a brand new culture, a culture of life, a civilization of love. I want to see it, and I want to see it starting from the Aid for Women. And I want to see what I saw today. I want to see 1,000 more of it because it's already incredible what they are doing with the little they have. I saw a life being saved. I don't know if I'm meant to talk about this specifically, but I was there when this woman came in and a pregnancy test was done. I was there, it was positive, and just the love with which she was attended to, and just knowing that I was literally watching a human life being saved. I want to see more of that, honestly. I want to see more of that. I want to hear good things. And I know that probably everybody who came here today had an intention of supporting Aid for Women. That's why you're here. Probably not for the food, even though the food is delicious. But I will ask you just one thing. Just one thing. And please pardon me. Anytime I'm about to do something that I think is a little bit audacious, I always tell people, please forgive me, I'm African, I don't know where to draw the line. Okay? So I do that at work all the time in the UK. I'm just like, I just want to tell you something. You're not meant to be living with that guy. He's not your husband, but I'm African. Okay? So I always try to use that as a nice excuse. So I'm about to do something. Maybe it's not the American way. Maybe it's not the nice brushed up way. But I know you already intended to do something to help the work, to support the work. Can I just ask you to indulge me? Whatever you were intending to do, just do a little bit more. Just a little. Oh, a lot. Okay? Okay, but just go a little bit further than if you had any intentions this evening, just go a little bit further. Why? Because because Uju was there today, and what I saw was incredible, and I want more of it, and I want to hear just great stories. And I also kind of want to feel good about having come here this year, because I know my Kokibe was here last year, and I just want to know, we measure up too. Yeah, a bit for my self-confidence. A bit for my self-confidence, honestly. So if you look on the table, there's I'd say this is gold, yeah? There's some gold envelopes. If you just pick it up. On the one side is a very important part if you have any prayer requests. You write a prayer request. We love to pray for you. There'll be mass being said for you at Heather's house and Monica's house, which are the maternity care homes where the women find safe haven. And on the back, very importantly, is what will ensure that Aid for Women continues to be a real nightmare to Planned Parenthood. Okay? I can't help myself. Just wherever they go, let's go next door. So it just gives you the options, the different things that you can give. And as I had said, if you had wanted to pick something, just move to the next one. So if you wanted to give $250 before, the next one is $1,000. You move. So really, just the pro-life movement, anyways, is not just only about the resources. It's the kind of love with which people give. It's the happiness and the joy with which people give, because whatever you are giving, it's about saving lives. It is about saving lives. I was discussing with Frances today at the Pregnancy Resource Center, and I said to her, anytime that we fail in our interventions as pro-life people, so you meet a woman and you're not quite able to reach her, yes, if we fail, yeah, she then goes in to have an abortion. For us, that is what failure means. It's that we just couldn't save this one, or we just couldn't make it. But think about the people who work in Planned Parenthood. When they fail, then that means that a baby is born. A baby is born. So let's make sure that their failure rate keeps going higher, just by by the fact that we are providing a safe haven where people can go. I am really grateful to you. I am grateful to you for your generosity. And I'm very grateful to you for your attention this evening and for your kindness and graciousness to me, that you have just listened to me, and hopefully you have heard something that has also touched your heart in whatever way. And I am hoping that, yes, maybe you don't see me again, maybe we don't stay in touch, that's fine. Aid for Women is here. What I'm here for is to make sure that they get not only money, but that they get friends for their continued journey. That you just continue to stick with them as real supporters for Aid for Women, and through Aid for Women for the women who are walking into Aid for Women centers. Thank you once again. I thank you, and I'll take all your greetings back to my Nigerian mom, who is right now just waiting for me to come back to her in London. But I will also tell her about just the beautiful people that I have met here, the wonderful friends that I have made here, and the miraculous thing that is always just pro-life people and their generous spirits in every way, and their genuine love for all people. So I thank you, and I thank you. God bless you.